All right, that's the lineup in that snippet right there. That's on the album that we're paying an homage to today. Happy 30th birthday to Yes's Talk album we're going to talk about. I'm Dan Schinder.
And I'm Steven Schinder.
And we're in the wrong spot. There we go.
Oh, right.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30 years of Talk. Wow. How time flies, right?
Yeah, and we're doing like a little talk show, I guess you could say, celebrating those 30 years. Yeah, it's crazy. When that album came out in 1994, it had been 25 years since their first album, basically, and it's closer to that first album time-wise than it is to now, which just doesn't feel right to me.
Wow, that is bizarre. Yeah, and you were, let me think, you were minus 1 year old.
Yeah, I was several months away from being born. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was 31, I guess. 31, 32, 31. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've evolved a lot more than I have since then. Cool. Yeah. So where do you want to start with this? Shall we start with the track list? Or do some history first? Yeah.
Yeah. So so for context, Yes had done the Union tour, and it was basically, at first it seemed like it was gonna be the 90125 lineup plus Rick Wakeman, but for various reasons he ended up not being able to, he couldn't be available for this album. So it was down to the 90125 lineup again. And during the Union tour, John had apparently been talking to Trevor, being like, let's write together. And so in 1993, they did that. They spent more time writing together, and you can really feel that on here. And Chris, Tony, and Alan are definitely involved, but it does kind of feel like they let those guys do their thing to sort of be it feels to me like they were the main creative drive on this album, and then they brought the rest in. So it's quite fascinating as an album. And it was also on the Victory music label, which was founded by Phil Carson of Atlantic Records. And that label would eventually fold. I think might have gotten bankrupt. So I'm not sure that there was as much promotion as there could have been. I know that ELP had their Black Moon, and I think later album In the Hot Seat might have also been on that label. But yeah, in 1994, there wasn't a whole lot of prog happening as it used to, but you would get stuff like Pink Floyd's The Division Bell, King Crimson was still active, and yeah, what do you remember in your experience, Dad, of what the musical scene was like at that time in 94?
So 94, I do remember, I believe that was not far away from, if I remember right, the Division Bell coming out, or was that late 80s? That
part of Division Bell was 94, yeah.
94, okay, that's what I thought. So I was going to say that part of my musical life is a little blurry, not because I was jacked up or anything, but in my world, that's just so long ago, and so many, been through so many.
Apparently, Division Bell was just a week after this. Wow.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. And I saw both shows. I saw the Talk tour at the Greek Theater, which I've mentioned quite a few times before. And also I did see the Division Bell at the Rose Bowl. I'll never go to a concert with that many people again. It's just not my thing, but I had to see that tour, and I'm glad I did. It was epic. So it was cool that prog was still alive, especially in the far west here in North America. But it had, and I remember this specifically about this album, Talk, had a very now sound. Like when 90125 came out, it was like, whoa, this is the sound of, the late 80s, the era, that whole thing. And then, we got Big Generator, great music, in my opinion. Production sounded squash. And then you get Union with the hodgepodge of all these different things, and sounded quite modern, still quite proggy. But then this just had a much more refined and the musicality just sounded much more, I'm going to say, thought out. It's an excellently produced album. You're welcome, Trevor. In fact, we were expecting Trevor to join us, but he had something come up, and he just wasn't able to join us. I'm thinking, like, I thought, like, what could be more important than coming here? And he's probably conniving with Yes Music Podcast or something. But we will be getting with Trevor again soon to talk about some stuff he's got to do with us in our membership site on Drum Talk TV. But it's a great album, and we've mentioned with Trevor before as well that he agrees that it's probably the very first album recorded completely to hard disk, completely digital. And considering that, and considering what's happened since then with people recording completely digital, it's quite a warm album. It's a very wide sonic spectrum. It has, to me, I think it totally has that fatness that you get from analog. It's got that punch. I Am Waiting, just such a big, big sound. It's quite an accomplishment musically and sonically. I love it. I really like the album, and we'll get more into that as well. Let me know when you're ready for me to go through the track list.
Yeah. Well, do you remember how you encountered the album? Like, when was the first time you were aware of it?
I think it came out and I bought it.
Okay, I think that says
like,
a lot
really,
about
like it was a well anticipated album, and it was like that roller coaster of, is Union gonna continue with it? Like, what were we thinking? You know what I mean? Even the part with Rick joining in, I don't know how close that came, but it was like, okay, this is it. And of course, the first, before the track list, let's do get into this. The first thing was simply, let me toggle through something real quick, folks. Hold on. So here's the first thing. This was the first moment, like, because no one knew what to expect. Roger Dean did Union, so it was Roger Dean back in the band, if you will. But the feeling I got from this album cover by legendary artist Peter Max is that, okay, they came out with something completely different when 90125 came out. Big Generator was yet different from that. And then this was even more different. I personally dug it. And here's one of the reasons why. I have some history with Peter Max art. When I was in first and second grade, which would have been 1970, 71-ish, that area, my mom, your grandmother, bought me book covers that were all Peter Max art. And I was the coolest freaking kid in elementary school, not to mention she made me paisley pants, different pairs of paisley pants that I wore to school every day. So I was kind of a hippie kid, I guess. And I loved Peter Max's art. And then as I grew older, I kind of lost touch with it. So when this came out, I was like, whoa, that looks like it is. So I dig it. It got a lot of flack because, there's a lot of people that say, hey, Yes isn't Yes without Hypnosis doing the album cover, or whatever. Insert whatever you want there. And Yes is whatever the F Yes says it is. That's the real answer. But I like it. And I do think it suits the music. I do think it suits the vibe. What are your thoughts on the cover?
Yeah.
And how did you come across it? I don't remember.
Yeah, the moment you start telling that story, I was like, oh yeah, that's how he feels about it. So I was kind of surprised just now, like, as it kept floating back. But yeah, from what I remember, it took me a while before being fully aware of the cover because, as a kid, I listened to live versions first, like I'm Waiting and Half of the Calling,
Right.
and then later go into like also hearing live versions of Real Love, Walls, Where Will We Be, or Where Will We Be and Endless Stream came before those other two, Real Love and Walls. But eventually I do remember when I was maybe 10ish, like 2004, 2005, you put in the cassette tape you had of this album of Talk, and I looked at the cover art, and I've always thought that it looked surprisingly simplistic for a Yes album. cover. Um, and like if I were to rank these, like I don't think it's a bad cover. It has grown on me, but I think it might be my least favorite of the Yes Studio album covers personally. I
Yeah.
kind of see though how 90125 and Generator, you said that those felt kind of different, but I do think that those had a visual consistency in terms of the computer graphics aesthetic used for those. With this, I think maybe you could argue that the sort of spacious background and the multiple colors in the middle could in some ways be a callback to 90125 in a very distant way. So I kind of wonder if maybe that's what they were going for. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of surprising to me. It's hard to say if it fits the music, but it's also equally tough for me to because I'm so used to this cover to imagine what a Roger Dean cover for
Yeah, I
the
can't. I
week.
can't even imagine. I want to show a couple other covers. And Steve, look at the text I just sent you. I want to show a couple other covers. Go ahead and chime in, folks. I see some comments. We'll get to those. We also have comments from people who commented on the promos that we put out for this show. We'll get to a bunch of those. We got a flood of those. We'd love to get a flood here during the show. We'll get to as many as we can, hopefully all of them. We'll get to that in a moment. But check these other covers out. I just don't remember this. This is talk, the demos and outtakes, and there's the lineup there: Alan, Trevor, John,
I
Chris,
think
and
that's
Tommy.
that might be a bootleg that was circulating around.
Yeah, I just don't remember it, and I can't hear it in my head, and it doesn't look familiar, which is great. I love discovering stuff 30 years after the fact or whenever that came out. And then I don't know if this is the back or a different one, but this is interesting. The band that created the concert experience. I think arguably that's true to a large degree, that they are one of the first, certainly Pink Floyd. I think Pink Floyd is, I think, the very first band to probably use anything multimedia related beyond lights. If you look at the overhead projector with the Vaseline between two pieces of acetate and someone moving it around with their fingers, I mean, that's a multimedia show right there, going back to the mid 60s. But truly, Yes has always evolved and put on a beautiful show with multimedia, whether it's lights, lasers, smoke, fog, confetti cannons, and Awaken on the latter tour, and whatnot. But this show visually was great. Before we get to the track list and double back on that, here's some pictures of the guys. There's Tony, there's Alan, there's Chris and Billy. Billy's first appearance with Yes in front of people. I don't know who that guy is. John Anderson and Chris with the roadie or something. I don't know. Just kidding, Trevor. So I'm very fond of this album and the tour. But yeah, let's go ahead and address the track list. And folks, if you're not familiar with this album, I highly recommend it for so many reasons. All the ones I kind of notated in the beginning. The production value alone. Yeah, someone could say, I hate the music, but you've got, I don't think, I hope no one says that, but you got to recognize the sonic qualities or just landmark of this album. So I think production wise, it's one of the best of all the Yes albums. We've got The Calling. That's Trevor, John, and Chris's piece. You got I Am Waiting by Trevor and John. Real Love by Trevor, Chris, and John. State of Play, which that is a different song from so many
Yeah.
things that Yes has ever done, let alone on this album. It's out here, and I love that song. That's Trevor, Chris, and John. Then you got that's Rabin and Anderson. Sorry, on State of Play. Walls is Trevor, Roger Hodgson, and Anderson. Wait, side note, I remember when I used to go visit Alan at his house when he lived in the neighborhood where I grew up. This was during the Yes West years. And when they were in between, which was, I think, before Union. Was it before Union? I believe it was before Union or after, but I remember going over to the house and Alan's mom was outside scrubbing the brick porch, and I said who I was, and she said, "Let me get Gigi," and she came out and said, "Oh, he just left to go. The band's writing with Roger Hodgson. He might be in the band." There was that whole period, and then that's when Alan, when he got back, told me about World Trade and Bill. So it was that whole weird period. So it's actually kind of neat to see that some of that music did emerge that they were working on with Roger. That's my point. Where Will You Be?
Yeah.
That's Trevor and John. Endless Dream. I'm not familiar with that one, but we'll check it out. Just kidding. That's Trevor, John, and Trevor and John, because there's three parts of that. There's the Silent Spring, which is the instrumental part, which I just love. It just harkens back to that prog element you can't dance to without hurting yourself. It's still good to do, but just crazy rhythmic stuff going on there. Just love it. Endless Dream Talk and Endless Dream, Endless Dream. Just really great work. I love this album. I really do.
Yeah, so when you first popped in this album and The Calling started, like what was your first impression? Because like the first notes like are sometimes everything, right? Like they sort
Yeah.
of set the stage for you.
That's a great question, because like almost every Yes album, you don't know what to expect, but
Right.
because of what you've listened to and what you've liked, and I like everything, you do have a preconceived notion. I'm sure that's with every band. When Queen came out with a new album, when Bebop Deluxe came out, whatever, right? And that guitar sound, I remember in the intro, was just so clean. And then there's the current Yes choir that was just so good. Such a great blend of voices. It like graduated from Leave It to better production and even better singing, even better, not to minimize Leave It, but it's like, okay, that thread is still there. That common denominator is still there. It's still such a staple in the Yes sound, which is really cool. And then it gets rocking, and there's that little round robin solo part, guitar, synth, guitar, organ, guitar, then the bridge. It's just really a great piece of music. I'm surprised it's still not getting a ton of radio play. It still has such a modern sound. And to me, that's the other thing. I hope I'm not going on too much about this, but is still the thing about that album is it doesn't sound dated. Seriously, folks, how much stuff in the 90s sounds just like the 90s and only the 90s? To me, this album isn't that.
Oh, that's funny because to me, I think because I know how it was produced and the computer technology they were using at the time, I think in my head it kind of sounds firmly in the 90s.
Okay, so let's switch gears for a moment. Just kidding.
but in one of the other comments, which we'll read later, someone else I think agreed with you while comparing it to something else. So
Okay,
like
cool.
it really depends on the listener, I guess.
It's so many things. It's the listener because of their context, their age. When did they enter the Yes first? For some people, this was their first album. There's so many things in that matrix, and there's no right or wrong. It's just whatever it is.
Yeah.
Let's go to, if you don't mind, right to some of the comments of the people that are live. Is that cool?
Yeah, and then
All right.
we'll go back to some comments I had about the music.
Okay, cool. So you can see it on the screen there. Christian Correa says, an Argentinian in February of 1985, 3 shows of Yes, amazing performance, lasers, spots, robotics, and Starship Trooper. Epic final show. Trevor Rabin in all caps. Amazing guitar hero. That's fair. And here we've also got Christian saying at the Rock in Rio, 85, Yes, 2 shows, 500,000 fans. Epic event. And I think they got paid like $2,000 each or something like that. Just kidding. Also, I don't, not even looking at names and just clicking on all these. Obviously, a huge Yes fan. Let's look at Nick. Hey, Nick. Then thank you for chiming in, Christian. Nick says, phenomenal album. Wish 90125 lineup stayed together. That's refreshing to hear.
Yeah, there were some comments I saw where they were saying they wish that Trevor had stayed a little bit longer. So
yeah. But I think that things happen the way they happen, and it's part of what makes that era special. You know what I mean? Like, look at the the early Tony K era, and so on and so on. So
Yeah, and Trevor was feeling like it was time for him to move on, and he went on to do film scores and had a huge career in that. So I
have
think
you
things
heard any of those? Ugh.
yeah, they're great. So
They
I
are.
think things worked out how they should have at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do some fan comments. And please, if you're watching live, chime in. I'll start with super fan Tony Jefferson of Drum Talk TV and Yesshift. The Calling, the long version, I Am Waiting, Endless Dream, and Real Love, surprise, he says in parentheses, as if that's a surprise that it's one of his favorites. He says, my band at the time covered Real Love. Our guitarist was a huge Trevor Rabin fan, and I was able to reproduce the electronic drum effects with my electronic acoustic drum kit. I saw 5 shows in 5 different cities on that tour. I met Tony K, Patrick Moraz, and Peter Banks in New York City at Yesshift. A lot of people don't know that Patrick Moraz was playing keyboards under the stage on that tour. Just kidding. All right, you're up next, Steve.
Yeah, and Ken Fuller says great album and was lucky enough to see them play much of it on the Talk tour.
Cool. And jumping back to the live comments just real briefly, Peter D'Amore says, woohoo, Talk tour, quadraphonic radio broadcast. I went to the front of the stage before the show just to see the crack in the back of Trevor's guitar that he shows in Yes Years. Thanks, guys. Whoa, that's a trip. I forgot about that.
Yeah, because in that documentary, he talks about when he like threw a guitar and someone was supposed to catch it, but didn't catch it. Yeah, and
totally forgot
fixed.
about that. Jeff LaCroix says Endless Dream is in my top 5 Yes songs. That's huge. I love it. That's great.
Yeah,
for context, I'd love to know what some of the other ones are. That'd really be cool. If you're watching live, Jeff, go ahead and let us know. That'd be really important to know, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And this next one, it's a very emotional one. Daniel Crone says, honestly, it's my favorite Yes album, largely because it was the last new album I listened to before my dad died. I was 7. The album always makes me think of him. So yeah, adds a bit of context of like where people are in their lives when some of these albums come out. Yeah.
And how music is indeed a part of the soundtrack of our life, music that that you're in love with at the coming of age years, or in your case, when you were starting to walk or being born, those different things you remember. Like I've cited before, when the Division Bell did come out, the first time I popped it in the CD, I remember being in a real small rental car because I had been in an accident. I was traveling through a very rural area between Simi Valley and Oxnard through the farms, and Steve was a little baby in the back seat, and it was drizzling, and there was the Division Bell. And every time I hear a song from that, I harken back to that. So Daniel, thank you for being so open and sharing something so special and personal. Jim Dexter says this is one of Yes's best albums, sonically and creatively, an absolute best Yes West effort. It is truly uplifting. That's great.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite of the Yes West lineup releases. Yeah,
I agree. Not to slight or minimize the others, but this is a masterpiece. It really is.
Yeah, I feel like the others were good, but this one I feel like has a sort of a maturity of it, like an evolution that I really appreciate about it.
It's the maturity, the maturing of that lineup, not that their debut album wasn't mature. It certainly was, but it's like that was their first effort together. And then they grew, then they did that thing with all those other guys. And then they said, okay, and this is truly their album,
Yeah. And Rob Lee Latham says, loved the album, huge sounding drums, great songs, along with the epic Endless Dream. Had 4th row in front of Trevor. The Peter Max tour t-shirt is framed and hanging in my studio. Wow. How can it be 30 years?
I know, right? I still feel like I'm 31. I'm going to be 61 in 10 days. That's just...
Yeah.
And Steve, like I said, was -1. And look at him. Look at him. Look at him. Strapping young man. Okay. Thank you, Rob. Dennis Schrader says, I bought it as soon as I saw it. I really love this album. I think the best of the 3 with this crew. I have literally listened to it in entirely 5 times in the last month. May have to play it again. I'm right there with you. I'm putting it on as some work music on my laptop later tonight. It's and you know what? I know what's going to happen. I'm going to not that I haven't fallen out of love, but I'm going to fall deeper in real love with it, and I'll probably binge on it. That's what happens with me. I've got an album up here, Magic Gardens by Johnny Jewel, that Steve turned me on to a year and a half ago, and it's been on heavy rotation for like the last 8 days. That's just how I do music. What can I tell you?
Yeah. Well, before we read more comments, before I forget this question, because we've talked a bit about like radio play and stuff like that. Um, I know that this album had a premiere party and on I think even on the radio and stuff like The
It
Calling
sounds
and
familiar.
yeah, and The Calling I think was on the radio at the time and Walls was played on David Letterman's show. So my question to you is if they had the time and resources to make a music video for one of the songs on this album, which
Endless Dream.
one?
Like, is that a real question, Steve? Come on. Who
Well,
raised you?
I guess there's two questions. Like, which one would you have wanted, and which one do you think would have realistically have happened?
I think The Calling or Walls, probably The Calling. Where Would You Be would be interesting because it's so ethereal, but Endless Dream would be my dream video. And I think The Calling. I think The Calling. It features all the players in so many different ways. The best way with, like I said, that round robin solo part, the choir. That's like that's their stamp on that sound of that era, and it's the first song on that album. It's just great way to just open the floodgates to what you're about to get.
Yeah, I think The Calling would be the realistic answer, and I could even imagine like a music video involving like I don't know, traveling on the road, being in cars because they talk about these different cities and I guess it's kind of a tip of the hat to the touring live and seeing all these different places.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a dream video that I'd throw out there is maybe one for I Am Waiting because, it's people like make songs about romance and there's a story there. And I could imagine something for that as well. Like I'm Waiting is such a huge favorite. And I was really happy to see ARW play it back in 2017 in Las Vegas.
Oh, that's cool. And I missed that. But that song, rewinding in my head through the whole catalog, I don't think there's a song in the entire catalog with that big of a sound. That's a big sound. It sounds like they're playing at the Inglewood Forum down the street from where I was born.
Definitely a power ballad, yeah.
Yeah, with no one there, but somehow perfect. It's just so big and large and fat. That was a tough one to live up to live. Like when I heard that, I thought, okay, how's this going to work? Because it already sounds live. So but it's perfect. It sounds like a live song. It was a no brainer.
Yeah. And hearing like any live version of it, that gets really emotional too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
let's go back.
Yeah. So Neva Lee says, this is the tour I met with John and spent time with him before the show. Also got to say hi to Trevor and Chris as we were walking backstage to meet John. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. Did John share his mushrooms and his apple? Just kidding. I have a story about that. Never mind. Joe Corsia, I think, perhaps. Sorry if I'm butchering that, Joe. It's a great album. It's side 2 of Going For, I think it means Going For the One 90s Update. That's a very interesting take. After Union, it's an amazing masterpiece. Those are really good, interesting takes. It's kind of like a continuation from Going For the One. And I kind of see that because Going For the One was the first album in a long time with some shorter songs. And that's interesting. I like that take, actually. Now I want to play those back to back.
Yeah, because I've long noticed how, Awaken and Endless Dream are kind of similar in their structure.
Yeah. But
like there'd be quiet parts and then like more complex parts, and then it would end like a bit more quietly. I think I even saw someone say "Endless Dream" begins like close to the edge and ends like "Awaken," but comparing it against the whole "Going for the One" album, I see that even more now because "Going for the One" and "The Calling" as the openers, and then you get like a love song, "Turn of the Century" and "I'm Waiting." So
Oh,
it's
the structure is almost right on now that you put it that way. But I want to say that
"Where Will
if
You Be," "Wondrous Stories." Yeah.
yeah, if I were to play those two albums back to back, I believe this is what I think when I hear it in my head. Going for the One, great album, absolutely love it. But then you put on Talk, and it makes Going for the One sound like you're listening to it through the lid of a shoebox. And you're listening to Talk through the best 7.1 system in a acoustically tuned studio. But also, if ever, nothing against Steve Wilson, and I might be naive here not knowing if this has been done, but if I were to hear that there's a Steve Wilson mix of Talk, why? Why? What is left to do with it? I'm sure Trevor might say, "Oh, I wish I did this," or "Now that I hear it, I could." But that's different. There's no reason for someone else to remix it or remaster it, in my opinion. It's that good of a production.
Yeah, and he's definitely said it's a headphones album, and there are things you pick up on when you listen to Talk on headphones, like an Endless Dream, the do, 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 how it swirls around, and like in
Oh,
State
yeah.
of Play, you notice the the same lyrics from "I'm Waiting," where it's like, "I wanna be inside your heart."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Eater says, I haven't listened to this album until a few months ago. Then someone on this group posted that it was the best of the best in his opinion. I listened to the album, and yes, it's a great album. What high praise. That's so neat.
Yeah, there were well, I told you this before we went live, but there were so many more comments than I was anticipating for this album, and like a lot of positive ones. Like there were several where people were like, "This wasn't really for me," type thing. But even after like narrowing it down to like comments to put on here, curate on here, there was still a bunch. It's crazy.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, Eric Wallengren says one of their absolute best. I found it in a bin for $1 and was absolutely blown away. Love this collection of tunes from the last version of Yes with Rabin playing. There's a lot of prog rock that sounds dated, and Eric mentions in parentheses relayer. Not this one. I still love Talk. Fight me.
That's cool. I'm going to jump over live real quick. Barbara. Hey, Barbara. Thanks for joining us. Barbara says Talk was Trevor's best album, in my opinion. The album got me through a dark time in my life. Wow. Another heartfelt, personal comment there. That's awesome. And see what music does for us. That's just so cool. That's a big part
Yeah.
of what music's all about. Scott Gross says, or did you just read that one? Sorry. Um,
No, we haven't read that one yet.
Oh, that wasn't the one. Okay, sorry. Not like I'm not paying attention, folks. I'm with you. Um, what were we talking about? Oh, so the Talk album was on the cutting edge of recording technology of the day. The music mirrored that without going too far. Trevor Rabin fashioned the perfect template for the rest of the band to contribute and flourish within. Extremely underrated album that ages better than most. That ages better than most. I totally agree with, because like I say, it doesn't, you don't hear it and go, "Oh yeah, that was the 90s." Like if you think of so many albums, the grunge and some Tears for Fears stuff, not that I don't like that, but there's some stuff that this is the 90s. Welcome to Earth, Aliens, The Greys. This is the 90s. I wouldn't put this album in there. I'd say this is more of a perennial, just whenever, type of album.
Right. Then we have John J.J. Hill, who says, "Don't get me wrong, I love the older stuff, but this was my favorite album. The addition of Trevor Rabin was genius and gave their music a new level. Actually saw them live on the 90125 tour."
Cool. Uh, Colin Grant says, I remember buying the CD. I wasn't even aware of its release, but it stated that the lineup was what the lineup was, and that was good enough for me, and that it was something new. I can't remember a single piece of promotion, but a great album. I wish Trevor Rabin had stuck around just a little bit longer.
Yeah, and again, like the promotion, not just for this album, but I think even with Keys to Ascension 2, from some stuff I've read, like some people didn't know about some of these things until like the last minute, which
Yep.
is, yeah,
I remember that for both of these actually.
yeah, thank goodness for the internet, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you know about stuff before it happens now.
Yeah. Kirsten Sino Berardino or Berardino says so many great songs on there. I'm not sure I can pick a favorite. They all hit me a bit differently. I vividly remember it coming out and being so excited to hear it. To this day, I still regret not seeing that tour.
Oh, that's cool though. There is video out there. Marlon Landry says originally I thought very little of it. Okay, we don't need. Let's skip to the next one. No, I'm kidding. Originally, I thought very little of it. I didn't appreciate it. Fast forward to now, and I easily consider it a top 5 Yes album. There are some epic sounds on it that eclipse many of the other releases. As a side note, this is the album I used to sound test speakers. What a turnaround. What happened in your life that changed your something in the model of your world, or your taste must have changed to suddenly appreciate it? But I think I've experienced stuff like that before. I just can't think of the why at the moment of any particular album, but that's really neat to hear. That's cool.
Yeah,
It's worth pulling stuff out. Like one of the things I talk about on Drum Talk TV sometimes is I do my best to encourage drummers and musicians to listen to music that you think you don't like. You will pull something from it. If you listen to it for the music, for what it is, and not your personal sensibilities, there's typically going to be a beat or a sound, a certain guitar effect, or a bass technique, or the production, or something you can pull and put over here, even in completely different music, because that's really all that music is. There's really only 5 notes. There's no circle of fifths. There's only 2. Just kidding. But I think you all know what I mean.
right. And then John Greenstein says most cohesive of the Yes West lineup. I think of it as close to the edge of the '90s. Great songs, great production. That
Interesting.
that's that's huge because you have like almost the same lineup as Close to the Edge, putting out a couple more epics on the Keys albums. So, but like this is John's like favorite epic of that era, it seems.
Yeah, that's interesting. Bob Kanoki, or Noke, says, I would love to see a mastered live version come out. I can't get enough of the Endless Dream solos. That would be great. That would be totally cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Sean Cleary says the production is amazing. Real Love and Endless Dream are my favorites. So heavy, and the guitar solo at the end of Real Love is one of my favorite guitar solos ever.
Wow.
Yeah, I think Real Love kind of has that City of Love energy to it, and like how it has a hard edge. Like, do you hear that as well?
Yeah.
That with that?
I totally on board with that. I totally get that. Yeah. That's cool. Not that it's not original, but I agree. Um, Dave Gomersall says, have an interactive version, which sadly can no longer be played on latter Windows versions. I remember that. I didn't have it, but I remember that now. Did manage to extract the files, which I play on iTunes. That's interesting. I remember that.
Yeah, that was the Yes Active CD-ROM, and I
Right.
remember discovering when someone like put those on YouTube, and they talked about the songs, and you'd also have like, I don't know if you remember this, but there's like this weird segment where John is talking about how everything comes from the ground, and even your computer, and he's all getting all like hippie and stuff. It's like kind of funny and out there.
Yeah. Everything comes from the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. And decomposes back to it, or evaporates into the ether.
Yeah, and people then compose music before or after that. I don't know, somewhere in the cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. Jack Gowan says, I got an autographed copy for getting on Rockline with them. That's cool. I loved the album, still do. That's cool.
Yeah.
Rockline with David Perry. Or
Uh,
no, I'm sorry. That was Bob
Yeah,
Coburn.
Bob Coburn. Yeah.
The late great Bob Coburn. Grew up with that. Grew up in LA on KMET, and then he moved over to the KLOS when KMET closed and became the Wave. Yeah, legendary DJ.
Yeah. Mike Solly says the whole album is brilliant. Endless Dream just might be my favorite song of all time by any band, period.
Wow.
Best yet.
Period.
Yeah, best Yes experience over July 10th, 1994 at the Gorge Amphitheater in Washington State.
Wow.
Yeah,
What?
I don't know if we've talked enough about Endless Dream on this episode so far, but that's a song where like I think it's really uplifting. Like because you get the it's the last time telling my and you go through this journey and it's kind of like going through the ups and downs of life, and then by the end you kind of learn that the love, like, this is what I take from it, that the love that's inside of you can be enough. Like, that's what the song makes me think about, and how, like, we are enough.
That's neat. When your brother was 3, I guess, when this came out, and I would go on that same rural drive from, the San Fernando Valley to where we lived in Ventura, and I would put this on. He always would bust up laughing every time that part came out that goes, ooh, that whole section he just thought was funny, I guess, because of the sounds. Real quick, before I read Dave's, let's jump over to Peter again. Peter Moore says, giant descending disco ball for the final part. Whoa, forgot about that. Epic.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. Yeah. Wow. It's amazing how much stuff is tucked away for I don't. And then someone opens that door. Hey, thank you for that, Peter. That's funny. And Dave Marquez says, got to meet and talk with Chris and Trevor backstage after winning front row tickets on this tour concert. A great moment in the life of a big Yes fan. Love all the songs on this album. Nice.
Yeah, Bruce Brockwell says, love the whole album. Real Love is very heavy, almost Zeppelin-esque at times. I know that's bold, but that song is very rock and roll in spots. So, Dad, you're more in tune with Zeppelin than I am. What do you think of that comparison?
Yeah, I think that pretty sure Bruce is referring to, there is a heaviness aspect to that big fat drum sound. Bonham had just that room drum sound, no pun intended, even though some were recorded with one mic in the foyer to the mansion there. But yeah, I could see what he's saying there, or hear it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's fair. Tim, this is an interesting comment. Tim Luderby says 70s yes of that era. And I'm going to guess what he's referring to and say what I think of when I read that and hear it is the artistic sense and the complexities, with also some other stuff for people who aren't musos and don't appreciate the Endless Dream stuff enough. There's The Calling and Walls, and that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, because when I read that, I was kind of perplexed, because I think the albums that came out after Talk felt closer to the 70s Yes sound, which itself changed over time, even in the 70s. But yeah, that's an interesting comment there. And Alan Walker, and then after this, I'll have more to say about the music, says, in my opinion, The Calling is the perfect evolution of what the original Yes concept was. Yeah, that's fascinating, because I remember a while ago, I was watching some excerpts of interviews from, like, the Talk period, and John Anderson would say stuff like, this is the Yes album I've been waiting for years. And, like, I've always wondered, like, what did he mean by that? Like, did he mean, like, technologically wise, or in terms of the material, or in terms of just actually working with Trevor this time? Because for 90125, John came on toward the end, and in Big Generator, things were kind of fragmented, and this was where they really truly collaborated on Talk.
Yeah. Yeah, the gelling was. I'd love to get some elaboration on Alan's thoughts on that. It's quite a provocative and contemplative statement there. But there's some great stuff here. We always appreciate when you folks chime in during the show, on the archive, and also on the promo so that we can collect all these things. It's your show too. No one wants to just sit and listen to Steve and Dan talk. Not even Dan and Steve want to listen to that. So we
Yeah,
we
I mean,
love
I still have more to say, but yeah.
yeah, but we love bringing your comments and thoughts into it because we're a community of Yes fans, and we don't want to just get up here and just talk about it and give you our perspective. Who cares? It's more of a collective thing, as Yes music has always been collective of so many things. So I'm gonna listen to this later
Yeah.
tonight for sure. It's been a little bit since I've heard it. Maybe I haven't since it came out. No, I'm kidding. But it's a great traveling, blasted as loud as you can album, which reminds me, I don't have my hearing aids in all this time. I just realized that.
And for those who may not know, on 90124, which was the Trevor Rabin album that he put out that had some Yes related demos on it. It included Where Will You Be, like an instrumental version from 1991. So I guess that would have been around the time that John talked about on the tour, where he was like, there was a summer I went to Trevor's house and, he listened to them, scribbled some lyrics. So it pretty much sounds like the album version, just without the vocals and other stuff. The version of Walls that's on 90124, with Roger Hodgson singing, apparently it sounds very close to the talk version, but the lyrics toward the end where John sings, this indecision, will you break me? That part, it's not on that demo version. So I think John probably added those words to the talk version. Interestingly. Yeah. That demo is from 1990.
I want to read just 3 more comments unless others come in. Here's Peter again. Says re-listen app has the John and Trevor demos. Just go to 1994. I'm not even familiar with that. I'll have to check that out. And Peter also says, and a lot of other live shows have to listen to that or get the re-listen app. I'm not familiar with that at all. Are you, Steve?
I'm looking up if it's legal or not. I don't know what it is.
Leave it to Steve to keep me straight. And then Rick DeSarle says it's a Rabin solo album with Yes as the orchestra. I could see what you're saying, but I do hear, I do hear the influences of the other musicians, of course, but I understand there's a lot of Trevor out front as far as vocals and whatnot, but that's a good compliment. That's a real big compliment.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that I want to say about the music.
I'm just going to give a one little leak. You've heard of a wiki leak. This is a Danny leak, okay? A lot of people don't know this, and we're going to cover this on another episode coming up with some special guests. This is the only tour, I think it was this tour, where they played Freebird on a couple dates. I'm just going to leave that there. Follow us. You'll learn more about that.
Oh, yeah.
Freebird by Leonard Skinner. You folks will learn about that soon.
Right. There's also, like, someone earlier mentioned the long version of The Calling that appeared on a 2002, I think, Japanese release of the album. And
I saw that cover when I was looking for the covers for the graphic.
It has like a quieter section in the middle that lasts for maybe a minute. I can see why it was cut out. Like, I think the way that the song is on the album, like, it keeps the momentum of it. So
yeah, because CDs were 74 minutes, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, but there wasn't a timing issue. It's just I feel like because I think the album in total is like 55 minutes or something.
Okay.
But
cool.
Yeah.
That was a fun album to talk about. And we're so glad everyone chimed in. And we have some other stuff coming up, don't we, Steve? What do we have coming up? Oh, Oliver Wakeman's coming.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow we have Oliver Wakeman on our show. Yeah.
What day is this? Oh, that's tomorrow.
Yeah. Tomorrow, Friday, March 22nd, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time.
And on Saturday, the 23rd, we have a fan Q&A with legendary prog artist Derek Shulman of Gentle Giant, who went on to be the CEO, president, A&R person, respectively, in different labels, starting with Polygram, then Adco, then Roadrunner. Now he's doing 2+ music and entertainment. So Derek is going to be on in our membership site. Check it out at, Steve, maybe you could pop it in the comments there, at Drum Talk TV Brilliance.com. We have so many other things. In fact, today we solidified John Weathers of Gentle Giant's going to do the same. We also solidified Ron Riddle of Happy the Man, who then went on to write a few hundred soundtracks for National Geographic, for the Learning Channel, for Discovery Channel. That alone is worth attending if you want to get into that business and learn all about a whole other thing you can do with your musicality. We've got a couple other concerts that are exclusive to our membership site that we're solidifying the dates of, as well as a couple other artists. Trevor Rabin will be talking to you next week, and we'll solidify a date with Trevor. And I feel like I'm missing something. Looking at my old man paper calendar real quick. We've got...
Yeah, we're seeing what we can work out.
Oh, Oliver Wakeman's also doing a fan Q&A in that same... I know it's called Drum Talk TV Brilliance, but we're bringing other musicians in for concerts, Q&As. We've had the Kinky Wizards. We've had Holiday on Saturn, which features Aaron Emerson, some of his best friends. But on the 20th of April, Oliver Wakeman will do a combo Q&A and performance, and he has a motion picture soundtrack, a motion picture debut that he did the soundtrack for. Maybe he'll give us a live sample of that in that performance. We'll see. So there you go. Some stuff coming up. You could follow us. I forgot. Where, Steve?
At Yesshift on Facebook and YouTube, and just type in Yesshift on any podcast app and you'll probably find us. And you can write to us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com and feedback, suggestions. And yeah, this is a fun conversation celebrating talk.
Yep, I'm going to play it loud. I'm sure... No, I won't get any complaints. What am I saying? No one can hear what goes on here. I'm just used to that. If people play music too loud, they get a complaint. There will be no complaints. My dogs, my cats, my wife loves the music. We'll be fine. So thanks everybody so much for joining us. Thanks for chiming in. Thanks for writing in. And we will see you soon. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.